The first thing I noticed about the Wren Motor Lodge was the silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that has weight. The kind that presses against your eardrums like something is holding its breath, waiting for you to speak first. I pulled into the cracked asphalt lot at 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes before my shift, and sat in my car with the engine running, staring at the building. It was a single-story L-shaped structure, the kind of place that had died slowly over decades and never quite had the decency to finish the job. The neon sign out front read Wren Motel, but the R and the L had burned out years ago, so it just said Wren Mot. Half the parking spaces were filled with cars that looked like they hadn't moved in months, flat tires, windshields filmed with pollen and bird shit, one sedan with a tree growing up through its engine block. The highway that used to feed this place had been decommissioned in 2014. The exit ramp was barricaded now, chained off with a rusted sign that read Road Closed, NO through traffic. But the lodge was still open. Still had guests. That was the first thing that didn't sit right, and I should have listened to that feeling. I didn't. The owner was a man named Harlan. 60-something, sun-damaged skin, hands that shook slightly when he handed me the keys. He showed me the front desk, a cramped booth behind a sliding glass window, a rotary phone, a logbook, a coffee maker that looked like it predated the highway itself. And then he handed me a laminated card, the kind you'd see in a gas station bathroom, and he said, "Read these. Follow them. Don't get creative." There were 6 rules printed on the card in small, neat font. Rule 1, if the guest in room 6 asks for more towels, do not open the door. Slide nothing under it. Make no contact. He will stop asking. Rule 2, the hallway lights in the east wing flicker between 1:15 and 1:30. This is normal. Do not investigate. Rule 3, if you hear knocking from inside room 11, do not enter. The room is vacant. Rule 4, the ice machine runs by itself after 3 a.m. Let it. Do not unplug it. Do not look inside. Rule 5, if a guest approaches the desk after 4 a.m. and you do not recognize them from check-in, do not make eye contact. Complete the transaction and look away. Rule 6 was crossed out. Not scribbled over, crossed out with a single clean line of black marker, precise and deliberate, as if someone had wanted it readable enough to know it existed but not readable enough to follow. I asked Harlan about Rule 6. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "You won't need that one. Not tonight." And then he left. His taillights disappeared down the access road, and I was alone. The first 2 hours were quiet. I checked in 2 guests, a trucker in room 3 who didn't speak, and a woman in room 9 who paid cash and asked me not to log her name. I logged her name anyway. It was the only thing that felt like control. At 1:12 a.m., the hallway lights in the east wing began to flicker. I watched through the glass partition as the fluorescent tubes stuttered in sequence, one after another, like a pulse moving down the corridor. Rule 2 said this was normal. Rule 2 said don't investigate. I investigated. I grabbed the flashlight from under the desk and walked into the east wing. The carpet was damp, not wet, but damp, like the building was sweating. The flickering stopped the moment I stepped into the hallway. Total stillness. Total silence. And then, at the far end of the corridor, I saw the door to room 6 standing open. Just open. A dark rectangle in the wall. I hadn't seen anyone check into room 6. The logbook was empty for that room. I walked toward it slowly, flashlight beam trembling, and when I reached the doorway, I looked inside. The room was empty. Bed made. No luggage. No signs of occupancy. But on the pillow, there was a stack of white towels. Folded neatly. 6 of them. And they were soaking wet. I backed out. I closed the door. I returned to the desk and I did not think about it again for 40 minutes. At 1:58 a.m., the knocking started. It came from room 11. 3 slow knocks. Pause. 3 more. Pause. 3 more. The rhythm was too even to be accidental. Too patient. Rule 3 said the room was vacant. Rule 3 said do not enter. I picked up the master key. I told myself I was just going to check. Just going to look through the peephole. I walked to room 11 and I pressed my eye against the little brass circle and I looked inside. The room was dark, but not empty. There was a figure standing in the center of the room, facing the door. Facing me. It was tall, too tall, the proportions wrong, the head nearly touching the ceiling of a standard 8-foot room. It was wearing something dark and shapeless, and it was perfectly still. And then it raised one hand and knocked on the inside of the door. 3 times. The door I was leaning against. I felt the vibration through the wood. I stumbled backward. I did not run because running felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to admit. I walked. Quickly. Back to the desk. I sat down and I put the master key in the drawer and I closed the drawer and I did not open it again. At 2:34 a.m., the phone rang. The rotary phone on the desk, the one I hadn't even been sure was connected, rang with a sound like a bell struck inside a metal bucket. I picked it up. There was breathing on the other end. Slow. Wet. And then a voice, male, flat, no inflection, said, Room 6. I need more towels. Rule 1. Do not open the door. Slide nothing under it. Make no contact. I'm sorry, I said. Towels aren't available right now. The breathing continued. Then the voice said, I can see you through the window. I looked up. The front desk window faced the parking lot. Beyond it, the east wing. The window of room 6 was a dark square in the distance, maybe 60 feet away. I couldn't see anything in it. But the breathing on the phone was getting louder, closer to the receiver, and the voice said again, I can see you. I hung up. The phone rang again 30 seconds later. Same breathing. Same voice. Room 6. I need more towels. Open the door. I unplugged the phone from the wall. The ringing stopped. The silence that followed was worse. At 3:01 a.m., the ice machine turned on. It was in the alcove near the east wing, an old standalone unit with a dented front panel and a bucket that hadn't been emptied in what looked like years. It roared to life with a grinding, shuddering sound, like an engine turning over after a long freeze. Rule 4 said let it run. Rule 4 said do not unplug it. Do not look inside. I let it run. For 20 minutes, I let it run. The sound was mechanical and constant, almost comforting in its mundanity. And then it stopped. Abruptly. And in the silence that followed, I heard something else. A sound from inside the ice machine. Not mechanical. A soft, wet sound. Like something shifting. Like something settling. I stood up. I walked to the alcove. I told myself I was just going to check if it was jammed. I pressed my face to the little plastic window on the front of the machine and I looked inside. There was no ice. The machine had been running for 20 minutes and there was no ice in the tray. But there was something else. Something pale and curved, pressed against the inside of the plastic window. It took me 3 full seconds to understand what I was looking at. It was a hand. A human hand, fingers splayed, pressed against the glass from the inside. The skin was white, not pale, white, the white of something that had never seen light, and the fingers were moving. Slowly. Drumming. One at a time. Thumb. Index. Middle. Ring. Pinky. Thumb. Index. Middle. I stepped back. The ice machine started again. The grinding sound resumed, and I went back to the desk and I sat in the chair and I stared at the logbook and I did not look at the alcove again. At 3:47 a.m., the guest in room 6 came to the front desk. I heard the door to the east wing open. I heard footsteps on the damp carpet. Slow. Deliberate. And then he was standing on the other side of the glass. He looked normal. That was the worst part. He looked like a man in his 40s, average height, wearing a dark jacket and slacks. His hair was combed. His face was clean-shaven. He looked like someone's uncle. He looked like someone you'd pass in a grocery store and never remember. But his eyes were wrong. They were too still. They didn't move the way eyes move, no microsaccades, no shifting, no blinking. They were fixed on me with a focus that felt physical, like pressure against my sternum. "I need towels," he said. His voice was the same flat voice from the phone. Rule 1. Do not open the door. Make no contact. "We're out of towels," I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. He smiled. It was a small smile, polite, the kind you'd give a stranger. But it didn't reach his eyes. It couldn't reach his eyes, because his eyes were already doing something else. They were looking at me the way you look at something you've already decided to take apart. "I'll come in and get them myself," he said. He reached for the door handle. The front desk door. The one I was sitting behind. The one that was locked. The handle turned. The lock clicked open. He pushed the door inward and stepped through, and the temperature in the room dropped so fast I could see my breath. He walked toward the desk. He walked behind the desk. He stood next to me, close enough that I could smell him, a smell like wet concrete and something sweet underneath, something organic and wrong. He leaned down. His face was 6 inches from mine. And he whispered, "You looked in the ice machine." I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. My throat had closed. He straightened up. He walked to the supply closet. He opened it. He took 6 towels. He folded them neatly, one by one, on the counter. And then he looked at me one more time with those still, wrong eyes, and he said, "Thank you," and he walked out. The door closed behind him. The lock clicked. The temperature returned to normal. And I sat there, shaking, for 11 minutes. At 4:08 a.m., a woman approached the desk. I didn't recognize her. She was not in the logbook. She was not one of the 2 guests I had checked in. She was standing at the counter when I looked up, as if she had materialized there, and she was smiling the same polite, wrong smile as the man from room 6. Rule 5. If a guest approaches after 4 a.m. and you do not recognize them, do not make eye contact. Complete the transaction and look away. "I'd like a room," she said. I looked down. I opened the logbook. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. "Name?" I said, staring at the page. "It doesn't matter," she said. I wrote a dash. I assigned her room 11. I slid the key across the counter without looking up. I heard her pick it up. I heard her footsteps recede. I did not look up until the east wing door closed. And then I looked at the logbook. At the line where I had written her room assignment. The ink was wet. But above it, in handwriting that was not mine, in the space for room 11, there was already a name. It had been there before. It had been there the whole time. I just hadn't looked. The name was my name. I stood up. I grabbed my car keys. I was going to leave. I didn't care about the shift, the job, the money, any of it. I was going to walk out the front door and get in my car and drive until the sun came up and I never looked back. I reached for the front door. And that's when I saw the laminated card on the counter. The rules. And I looked at Rule 6, the crossed-out one, and I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. The marker line wasn't perfectly opaque. If you held it at an angle, if the light hit it just right, you could see what was underneath. The original text. Still there. Still readable. I tilted the card. The fluorescent light caught the laminate at the right angle. And I read Rule 6. Rule 6, if you are reading this, you have already checked in. Do not leave before 5 a.m. The doors will not open. The phones will not work. The highway is closed. You are part of the lodge now. You have always been part of the lodge. The guest in room 6 needed towels because you will need towels, when it is your turn to stand at the window and wait for the next one. I looked up. The front door was locked. Not just locked, sealed. The handle wouldn't turn. The deadbolt had no keyhole on this side. The windows were the same. I pressed my face to the glass and looked out at the parking lot. My car was gone. The space where I had parked was empty. The trucker's car was gone. The woman's car was gone. Every car in the lot was gone. The only vehicle left was the sedan with the tree growing through its engine block, and it was closer to the building than it had been before. It had moved. It was right outside the door. And in the window of room 6, a light had turned on. And there was a figure standing in the window, looking out at me. It was tall. Too tall. The proportions were wrong. And it was wearing my jacket. The clock on the wall read 4:17 a.m. I had 43 minutes until 5 a.m. 43 minutes until my shift ended. 43 minutes until I could leave. I sat back down at the desk. I opened the logbook. I turned to a fresh page. And I began to write the rules, in neat small font, on a blank card I found in the drawer. 6 rules. I wrote them carefully. I wrote Rule 1 about the towels. I wrote Rule 4 about the ice machine. I wrote Rule 5 about the guests after 4 a.m. And then I picked up a black marker. And I wrote Rule 6. And I crossed it out. One clean, precise line. Because someone would come after me. Someone always comes. And they would need to know the rules. They would need to follow them. They just wouldn't need to know Rule 6. Not yet. The ice machine started again at 4:23. I let it run. The knocking from room 11 resumed at 4:31. I did not investigate. The phone rang at 4:48. I did not answer. At 4:59, the man from room 6 walked past the desk. He didn't stop. He didn't look at me. He walked to the front door, and it opened for him, and he stepped out into the dark parking lot, and he was gone. At 5 a.m., the sun came up. The door unlocked. The phone line came back. My car was in the lot, right where I'd left it. I stood up. I walked to room 6. The door was open. The room was empty. The bed was made. And on the pillow, there were 6 towels, folded neatly, soaking wet. I picked them up. I carried them to the front desk. I set them down. And I waited. Because the next shift starts at midnight. And someone will be here by 11:47, pulling into the cracked asphalt lot, staring at the building, noticing the silence. And I will hand them the keys. And I will hand them the card. And I will tell them to read the rules. And I will not tell them about Rule 6. If you found this story unsettling, subscribe. There are more rules out there, in places just like this one, waiting for the next person to break them.